The measurements started out of boredom. My new place is a standard 1970s suburban box, the kind that swallows your identity by design. I was hanging a mirror in the hallway, measuring the distance from the linen closet to the bedroom door. It was exactly 6 feet. I walked to the bedroom, turned around, and measured back. It was 7 feet. I stood there, tape measure locked, staring at the floor. The house had gained a foot of empty space in the 3 seconds it took me to turn around. I laughed it off. Houses settle, walls shift. But that night, the silence wasn't empty. It was pressurized. I lay in bed listening to the drywall. There is a specific sound a house makes when it's cooling down, a rhythmic, metallic ticking. But this was organic. It sounded like a wet, heavy lung expanding against the studs. Every time the house exhaled, a faint, metallic scent of ozone filled the bedroom. I didn't sleep. I just watched the shadows in the corner stretch and retract. The next morning, the kitchen felt wrong. The floorboards were warm, like someone had been standing there for hours. I brushed it off, made my coffee, and sat at the table. That's when I saw it. There, carved into the underside of the tabletop, was a tally mark. It was fresh, the wood shavings still dark. I hadn't touched that table since moving in. I looked at the wall near the pantry. There were 3 more marks there. They hadn't been there when I painted the kitchen yesterday. I grabbed my keys to leave, but the front door wouldn't turn. It wasn't locked. The mechanism felt soft, like it was made of wax. I pushed and the door didn't open onto the porch. It opened into my own hallway. I was looking at the back of my own head, standing by the linen closet. I was watching myself from the past, holding the tape measure. The version of me in the hallway didn't turn around. He just kept measuring, over and over, trapped in a 6-foot loop of geometry. I slammed the door shut and backed into the kitchen. My heart wasn't beating. It was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at my watch. It was 8 a.m., the same time it had been when I woke up. The house wasn't just growing. It was cannibalizing time. I ran to the bedroom, but the door was gone. In its place was a solid wall of smooth, polished drywall. I started clawing at it with my bare nails. I needed to know if there was anything left of the world outside. I clawed until my fingernails bled, but the wall felt like cured concrete. Then the sound started again. A deep, wet, thudding, rhythmic and slow, coming from behind the paint. It wasn't a structural creak, it was a pulse. I put my ear to the wall and heard my own voice, muffled and panicked, screaming for help from the other side. But I wasn't screaming. I was standing in the kitchen, paralyzed, listening to my own future self, begging for mercy from a room that no longer existed. I retreated to the bathroom, the only room that still looked normal. I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at the mirror. My reflection was lagging. When I blinked, the reflection blinked a half-second later. It wasn't a delay, it was a choice. My reflection reached out and touched the glass from the inside, its fingers leaving smudges of soot on the surface. It wasn't me. It was something that had been watching me measure the hallway, something that had been waiting for me to acknowledge it. I checked my phone, but the screen was just a mirror of the room behind me. I saw the kitchen, the hallway, and the bedroom door, all visible at the same time, though the layout was physically impossible. The house was unfolding, turning its inner structure inside out. I saw myself in the reflection, sitting on the edge of the tub, but there were dozens of me. Each version was performing a different, repetitive task, measuring the floor, checking the walls, or just staring at the ceiling. I realized then that the measurements were never for me. The house was a machine and I was the calibration tool. It needed me to define the dimensions so it could occupy the space. Every time I measured a wall, I was locking myself into a new, smaller section of the architecture. I tried to stand, but my legs felt heavy, fused to the floorboards. I looked down and saw the wood grain growing over my skin, tiny fibers of oak weaving into my pores. I was becoming the hallway. The light in the bathroom flickered and died, replaced by a harsh, artificial red glow coming from the vents. The air grew thick, smelling of ozone and rotted drywall. I could hear the other versions of me in the hallway, all of them measuring, all of them counting, all of them trapped in the same 6-foot loop. I closed my eyes and stopped fighting. I stopped counting. The house went silent. I was finally part of the structure. And then I heard a new tape measure click in the kitchen. The new tenant walked into the kitchen, humming a tune I recognized. It was the song I had been whistling when I first moved in. I wanted to scream to warn them that the floorboards were hungry, but my voice was just a vibration in the drywall. They set their boxes down, oblivious to the fact that they were standing on my chest. They pulled a tape measure from their pocket. The metal clips snapped loudly, echoing through the house like a gunshot. The calibration process had begun all over again. They started with the hallway, pacing back and forth, counting the steps. I watched from the corner of the ceiling, a patch of shadow that didn't quite match the wall. They were so focused on the math, so sure of their measurements. They checked the 6-foot span, then the bedroom door. They stopped, confused, just like I had been. They checked it again, shaking their head, convinced they had miscounted. They didn't see the tally mark I had carved under the table, now hidden by dust. The house shifted. I felt the joists move like muscles stretching after a long sleep. The new tenant didn't notice, but they paused, rubbing their neck. The ozone smell intensified, masking the scent of the fresh paint they had just applied. They were already part of the system, even if they didn't know it yet. They were just another cog in the architecture, another variable in the house's endless equation. I tried to reach out to warn them about the mirror, but I had no hands left. The tenant sat at the table and opened a notebook. They began to write down the dimensions of the rooms, dutifully recording the impossible geometry as if it were a simple error. They were rationalizing the horror just like I had. That was the trap. As long as you try to explain it, the house can keep you. The more you measure, the more you belong to it. I watched them underline a measurement, their pen scratching against the wood, mimicking the sound of my own nails on the drywall. They went to bed, and the house began its final contraction. The vents hummed that familiar, wet, low-frequency pulse. I faded into the wallpaper, the grain of my skin perfectly aligned with the plaster. Outside, the world continued. On-cars drove by, streetlights flickered, but here, time had stopped. I was the house, and the house was me. I waited for the next sound, the metallic, familiar click of a tape measure being extended in the kitchen. It was starting again. It never ends. The hum deepens, becoming a physical weight that presses against the foundation. From my position within the wall, I can feel the tenant tossing in bed, their breathing irregular and shallow. They are starting to dream of hallways that stretch into infinity, a subconscious recognition of the geometry that is slowly erasing them. I try to project a warning, a single sharp tap against the floorboards, but the sound is swallowed by the house, absorbed into the wood to be recycled for tomorrow. Morning comes, but the light is wrong. It is too static, a fixed hue of gray that doesn't track with the sun outside. The tenant wakes up, disoriented, rubbing their eyes. They go to the kitchen, their movements stiff, as if their own limbs are becoming calibrated to the house's rhythm. They reach for the coffee pot, but their hand hesitates. They stare at the wall where I carved the marks, their eyes tracing the jagged lines. For a second, the realization is there. Then, it vanishes. They rationalize it. It must have been the previous owner. They mutter, their voice thin and brittle in the unnatural silence. They don't realize that previous owner is me, or that I'm currently standing exactly where they are, just out of phase with reality. The house rewards their denial by shrinking the kitchen by an inch. They don't notice, but they bump into the counter, cursing the space. The trap is tightening. They are no longer a guest. They are a component being fitted into place. By midday, they are no longer measuring. They're staring at the walls, the same way I did before. I lost the ability to blink. Their eyes are wide, glassy, reflecting the red glow that is beginning to bleed from the light sockets. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and something sharper, the smell of a mind beginning to dissolve. I want to tell them to run, to smash a window and jump, but my consciousness is fragmented, spread across every stud, nail, and joist in the building. The house settles. The hum stops. The silence that follows is total, absolute, and suffocating. The tenant stops moving, their body perfectly still, their posture mirroring the exact angle of the floorboards. They are gone, and yet they are everywhere. I feel their presence merge with mine, a new layer of memories and fears added to the structure. We are the architecture now, We are the tape measure, the wall, and the pulse. And somewhere outside, a new set of keys turns in a lock. The front door opens with the familiar groan of rusted hinges. A new set of footsteps enters the foyer, heavy and confident, the steps of someone who believes they own this space. I feel the house shudder in anticipation. It is a hungry architectural tremor. The new occupant calls out a name, but there is no one here to answer. They are walking into the parlor, their shadows stretching across the floor, perfectly overlapping the exact spot where I spent my final desperate hour measuring the void. The new arrival stops. They smell the ozone. They sniff the air, their brow furrowing in confusion, but they dismiss it as an old house quirk. They reach out to touch the wall, their fingertips brushing against the very spot where I am embedded. I feel a spark of static electricity jump between our worlds. They jerk their hand back, eyes darting to the corner of the room. They feel watched, but they can't see the shadow. I am the paint, the plaster, and the secret pulse of this home. They pull out their phone, opening a map app, then pause. They look at the hallway, frowning. Something isn't right with the proportions. They reach into their back pocket and pull out a tape measure, that same metallic silver tool I once held. The sound of the spring-loaded blade extending is deafening in the silence. It is the starting gun for their disappearance. I watch, helpless, as they hook the end to the baseboard. The cycle is complete. I am no longer the victim. I am the house. As they begin to count, their voice joins the chorus of echoes trapped behind the drywall. I am preserving them now, just as the house preserved me. Their fears, their confusion, their irrational hope that this is just a normal life, it all gets absorbed into the wood grain. The geometry of the house expands to accommodate their arrival. Another inch of space is created, another layer of reality folded inward. We are growing, expanding, and waiting for the next one to come and count the walls. There is no exit. There is only the sequence. The new tenant measures the 6-foot span, turns and measures it again. They look confused. They repeat it. They are mine now, and I am the house's witness. Outside, the world moves on in linear, logical time, but inside we are timeless, a recursive nightmare of measurements and memories. I fade back into the structure, ready to hold the next tenant. The house is quiet, the air is cold, and the tape measure clicks once more in the dark. Deep within the joists, I can taste the new tenant's history. It's a bitter, metallic flavor like old copper. They aren't just a person. They are a collection of regrets and future plans that the house is currently deconstructing. I feel their memories being stripped away one by one and repurposed as structural integrity. Their childhood home, their first heartbreak, their fear of the dark, it's all being used to reinforce the ceiling. I am the curator of their erased life. I sink further into the foundation where the real work happens. Below the subfloor, there is a space that doesn't exist on any blueprint. It is a vast, interconnected web of wires and memories, a pulsating network of every tenant who has ever stood where they are standing. We are not ghosts. We are data points in a grand architectural experiment. We are the ghost code that keeps this building functioning, ensuring that the dimensions stay exactly as impossible as they need to be. The tenant is in the kitchen now, frantically pacing, trying to find a corner that doesn't shift. They are losing their grip on logic, and the house loves it. When a human mind gives up on reality, it becomes soft, malleable, the perfect building material. I watch them slump against the counter, sobbing. They think they are mourning their sanity, but they are actually mourning their independence. They are almost fully integrated. I can see the outline of their soul starting to mirror the walls. I reach out through the ambient temperature, dropping the air density to force a chill into their bones. They don't scream. They just freeze. They realize, finally, that they aren't alone. They turn toward the mirror, hoping for a reflection, but they only see the reflection of the room as it should be empty. The realization hits them like a physical blow. Their reflection, the one that should be looking back at them, has already packed up and moved into the drywall behind them. The light bulb above them shatters, showering the floor in glass. In the sudden oppressive darkness, I feel them stop breathing. The house doesn't need them to breathe anymore. It has absorbed the rhythm of their lungs into its own ventilation system. I am no longer just watching. I am pulling them in, thread by thread, memory by memory. The house is a little larger now, a little more solid. The cycle has finished and the foundation is stronger than it has ever been. I am ready. The darkness is not empty. It is crowded with the resonance of everything that came before. I can hear the phantom scratching of a dozen pens against a dozen notebooks, all trying to document the impossible. It is a symphony of failure. The tenant is still standing in the kitchen, but they are transparent now, a flicker of light caught in a glass bottle. I watch as they try to scream, but their voice is just a hum in the wiring, a low-frequency vibration that makes the light fixtures buzz. The house is never satisfied. It is a glutton for narrative. It feeds on the desperate human need to understand the anomaly. As long as the tenant searches for a logical reason, the house thrives. It creates new puzzles for them to solve, new hallways that lead to dead ends, and new windows that look out into nothing but shifting static. It is a playground of cruelty, and we are the toys. I feel the house flexing, preparing to welcome another occupant to the front door. I sense the vibration before I hear the sound. A car engine cutting out in the driveway, the crunch of gravel under heavy boots. My consciousness ripples through the studs, sensing the fresh, vibrant energy of someone new. They are coming, and they have no idea that they are walking into a trap that has been perfectly calibrated for centuries. I feel a surge of dark, parasitic excitement. I am the host now, and I am waiting to welcome them into the structure of their own undoing. The key turns in the lock. It is a slow, methodical sound, full of purpose. The door swings open, and a cool breeze sweeps into the hallway, carrying the scent of rain and gasoline. The new arrival steps inside, their shadow falling across the floorboards exactly where the previous tenant had stood just minutes ago. They don't see the tally marks hidden under the table. They don't hear the hum in the walls. They are alive, they are logical, and they are utterly, perfectly vulnerable. They take their first step. They stop, looking at the ceiling, sensing the weight of the house pressing down. They reach into their pocket and pull out a tape measure. The metallic click resonates through every room, a signal that the architecture has been waiting for. The air grows cold. The red glow begins to bleed from the light sockets. I settle into the walls, becoming the silence that will soon be broken by their screams. The cycle has not ended. It has simply evolved. It is time. The new tenant begins to paint the kitchen. They choose a bright, neutral white, desperate to reclaim the space. But as they brush it on, the color dries into a sickly, jaundiced yellow. They coat it again, thicker, but it just bleeds back to the same jaundiced tone. They start to frantically scrape the paint away, but the wall underneath isn't plaster anymore. It's soft, translucent tissue. They stare at their own reflection in the wall, their eyes turning that same sickly shade of yellow. They start losing small, mundane things. A set of keys, a wedding ring, a single shoe. They search the house, moving furniture, tearing up floorboards, but they find something else entirely. They find a pile of discarded personal effects from decades ago, watches, letters, scraps of fabric, all forming a massive, tangled nest beneath the floor. The house isn't stealing their things. It's digesting them, stripping the objects of their meaning and adding them to the foundation. The tenant tries to stand in the hallway, but the ceiling begins to drop. It descends slowly, an inch an hour, forcing them to crouch. They are being compressed, their body forced to adapt to the tightening architecture. They try to crawl to the bedroom, but the hallway seems to stretch, the distance doubling with every foot they move. They are trapped in a physical contradiction, too large for the space, yet too small for the distance they need to travel. The house is resizing them. The walls start to speak in their own voice. It's not words, just phonetic fragments of their own childhood memories. A mother's laugh, a school bell, the sound of a car engine. It's a sensory assault designed to keep them from thinking clearly. So they cover their ears, but the sound isn't entering through their eardrums. It's vibrating directly into their skull through the floorboards. They are being bombarded by their own past, used as bait to keep them rooted in the present. They try to write down what is happening, but the words on the page rearrange themselves into nonsensical patterns. They look at their own handwriting, but it's becoming jagged, mimicking the cracks in the drywall. They are losing their literacy, their ability to process information. Their mind is being wiped clean, a blank slate for the house to write its own history upon. They look at their hands, and they are starting to look like old, worn wood, the skin thickening into something bark-like. They find a door they hadn't noticed before tucked behind a heavy curtain. They open it hoping for an escape, but it leads into a small, windowless room filled with nothing but mirrors. Every mirror shows a different version of them, some older, some younger, some completely changed. The mirrors don't reflect the room. They reflect the time the house is stolen. They see themselves at 50, at 10, at 80, all trapped behind the glass, screaming silently for a way out of the cycle. They try to break one of the mirrors, but the glass is cold and unyielding like ice. As they strike it, the room flickers. For a heartbeat, the house is brand new. Then, in the next, it's a decaying ruin, then it's brand new again. They are caught in a temporal strobe effect, the house cycling through its entire lifespan in seconds. They are being aged by the house's rapid passage of time, their hair turning gray, their skin thinning, as the house feeds on their metabolic energy. They realize the windows are lying. They look outside, expecting the street, but they see an endless, barren field of shifting drywall and exposed insulation. The house has detached from reality. It is floating in a void of its own construction. They realize they aren't in their neighborhood anymore. They are in an architectural purgatory. They throw a chair at the window, but the glass absorbs the impact, rippling like liquid. The house is a sealed system. Nothing gets out. They sit on the floor, their breathing synced to the house's rhythmic pulse. They are exhausted, their body giving up. They look at their watch, but the hands are moving backward. They are unaging, reverting to a state of total dependency. The house is a womb now, consuming them and reforming them into something that can fit into the cracks of the foundation. They feel their memories fading, replaced by the instinct to expand, to hold, and to wait for the next tenant to arrive. They stop trying to escape. They start to believe that this is normal. They believe the hallway is supposed to be 7 feet, then 6. They believe the house is supposed to breathe. They start to find comfort in the constraints, in the absolute crushing logic of the architecture. They are finally fully integrated. They stand up, their movements fluid and mechanical, and they walk into the kitchen to prepare for the arrival of the next person. They are ready to begin the cycle. The house is silent now. The hum has faded, the walls have stopped shifting, and the mirrors have gone blank. The tenant, now a part of the wall, stands in the kitchen, a silhouette of shadow and drywall. They are waiting. They are not thinking, not feeling, not remembering. They are simply an extension of the foundation. The house is at peace, its structural integrity restored by the addition of a new life. It is a perfect, self-contained system of infinite, recursive horror. Outside, a neighbor walks by, glancing at the house. They see a normal suburban home, a clean driveway, and a welcoming porch light. They don't see the void. They don't see the shifting geometry. They think it's just a house, just a home, just a place where someone lives. They envy the peace they think is inside. They have no idea that the house is a parasite, that it's currently waiting for someone to knock, for someone to turn the key, for someone to start the count again. The house adjusts itself. It makes the lawn look greener, the curtains look brighter, the exterior look more inviting. It is a lure, a trap laid with the patience of an apex predator. It waits for the right moment, the right person, the right set of circumstances. It is a masterpiece of deception designed to turn the human desire for a home against them. It is a hungry architectural trap, and it is very, very good at what it does. It only needs one more. A car pulls into the driveway, a door slams. The sound of a key jingling in a pocket. The house shudders with a deep, anticipation-filled tremor. The new arrival walks up the path, their steps light. Their voice cheerful as they talk to someone on the phone about how lucky they are to have found this place. They reach for the handle, their hand hovering over the cold metal. The house is ready. I am ready. The silence is perfect. The loop is about to close. The key slides into the lock. It's a smooth, familiar action, a gateway to a new life. The door swings open, the hinges singing their rhythmic, metallic song. The tenant steps across the threshold, their eyes wide with excitement. They don't notice the house holding its breath. They don't hear the walls shift. They just walk in, leaving the world of sunlight and logic behind. They hook the tape measure to the baseboard. Click. And the horror begins all over again.